Alex Murdaugh, a facade of glamour and power. The state of South Carolina versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh was the trial of American former lawyer Alex Murdaugh for the murder of his wife Maggie and their 22-year-old son Paul on June 7th, 2021. The trial in the 14th Circuit of the South Carolina Circuit Court began on January the 25th, 2023 and ended on March the 2nd with a guilty verdict on all 4 counts. Murdaugh, who had pleaded not guilty, was sentenced to 2 life sentences to run consecutively without the possibility of parole. Murdaugh plans to appeal the verdict. Local media called the trial South Carolina's trial of the century, and arguably one of the most high-profile and sensational cases in South Carolina legal history. This trial has received considerable prominence in the United States and overseas. I've waited until the conviction and sentencing to examine what are we dealing with here. Is Alex Murdaugh a normal individual that was pushed over the edge as a consequence of external stressors which resulted in the diminution of his emotional empathy for family members, leading him to murder them? Is he indeed innocent? Well, the conviction says not. He appears to maintain his innocence, making the ill-thought-out appearance in the dock to defend himself. More on that later. Or is this an individual who operates a facade of glamour and power, but that covered up some dark and dirty behaviours, which then culminated in him murdering his wife and his son? And is this the behaviour of a narcissist, or maybe perhaps a psychopath? As always, I'm going to examine the evidence, much of which I'll take you through, but understand there's other evidence that I look at that I may not necessarily report on in order to maintain brevity. As we look at various behaviours of Alex Murdaugh, the evidence that has come forward as to his behaviour in relation to these killings, and more widely with regard to how he's been viewed by people, how he's behaved towards people in his position as a lawyer, how he's seen within the local community. Do we find the requisite narcissistic indicators? Do we find the requisite psychopathic indicators? Or are they absent, leading us to conclude that he is not a narcissist nor psychopath? On June the 7th, 2021, Alex Murdaugh, who was born on 27th of May 1968, and a member of the locally prominent Murdaugh family of attorneys, called police from his cell phone at 10:06 p.m, saying that he discovered the bodies of his wife Maggie, 52, and their younger son Paul, 22, near the dog kennels at the family's hunting lodge in Islandton, South Carolina. Each had been shot multiple times in the heads, wrists, and chest with different guns. Murdaugh reported at the time of the killings, later determined to be about 9 p.m, he had been with his mother, who has dementia. In October 2021, it was revealed that South Carolina Law Enforcement Division had regarded Alex as a person of interest in the homicides since the start of the investigation. The investigation has been heavily criticised. The crime scene was spoiled by rain, and the police reportedly failed to collect DNA evidence and allowed family members and friends to walk through the scene. Murdaugh was then arrested in July 2022 after the Colleton County Grand Jury issued an indictment charging him with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, the deaths of his wife Maggie and of his son Paul. The indictment stated that Alex shot his wife with a rifle and his son with a shotgun. Sources close to the investigation said that cell phone data placed Murdaugh at the scene when his wife and son were shot. Prosecutors suggested that Murdaugh was motivated by a desire to garner sympathy in the wake of financial problems that were becoming public. Murdaugh pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors said that they would seek life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, not the death penalty. Murdaugh's trial began on January 25, 2023 at the Colleton County Courthouse in Walterboro, South California, with instructions from the judge and opening statements from the prosecution and defense. Defense counsel argued that the prosecution should be prohibited from asking questions relating to Murdaugh's financial crimes, but the judge overruled their objections. We'll be examining more about these financial crimes and what it tells us about him. On February the 7th, after several days of hearing arguments without the jury present, Judge Newman ruled that the testimony relating to Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes was admissible. He said that jurors were entitled to consider whether Murdaugh's financial situation was a motive for the killings. Newman also said that defense counsel had opened the door to testimony about the alleged financial crimes when they asked a witness to speculate about a possible motive for Murdaugh to commit the murders. On March 2nd, 2023, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Murdaugh guilty of 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Because of the intense public interest in the case, the verdict was transmitted live across the United States on major broadcast and cable news networks. After the verdict was read, Judge Newman denied a motion from the defense for a mistrial by saying the evidence of guilt is overwhelming. He told the jurors the circumstantial evidence, direct evidence, all of the evidence pointed to one conclusion, and that's the conclusion that you all reached. Newman later added that the jury had come to a proper conclusion as they saw the law and facts. Murdaugh was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole on March the 3rd. After his sentencing, Murdaugh was taken to the Kirkland Correctional Institution in northwestern Columbia, South Carolina, where he was to be evaluated for about 45 days to determine which maximum security prison he would be sent to. After the verdict, prosecutors held a press conference. The defense took questions from the media the day after sentencing and said that they would appeal the verdict. Defense attorney Jim Griffin said the Murdaugh family was steadfastly in Alex's camp. In an interview, Murdaugh's older brother Randy said he believed that his brother had not told the whole truth about what he knew about the killings. That's a summary, for those of you who are not familiar with the case, as to what has gone on, and a refresher for those of you that know. But what we're going to do is examine Alex Murdaugh's background, what he did in terms of a profession, what that meant, what behaviours were displayed in that, what was the family that he came from, how might that have forged who he was, influenced his behaviours, how did he interact with that family, how were the family known within the area? Was this part of this facade of glamour and power associated with the Murdaugh family? How did he treat his family? How did he treat his employees? How did he treat members of the public that he dealt with, clients, etc.? I'm going to go through all of this evidence from a variety of sources, and it's fascinating and compelling what I've unearthed and discovered about this individual, and all of this will then be determined to ascertain: are we dealing with a narcissist, possibly a psychopath, or something else altogether? Join me, H.G. Tudor, as I examine Alex Murdaugh under the Tudorscope.